Yeah. What has the reaction to the documentary been? You mentioned that Najib has been trying to get the documentary removed. Have you heard from other people?
Yeah, it's there's been a steady stream of people who are reacting to the doc, and it's been really heartwarming to see, especially the reaction from people who feel like their voices are finally represented by
Mhm.
this. All we're trying to do is just kind of tell the story of all the amazing people who uncovered this scandal. Really, like the film is built on the backbone of the journalists, the law enforcement officers, and the opposition politicians who really did the hard work of uncovering the story.
Mhm.
And that's kind of whose stories we're trying to tell. And I'm really grateful to everyone who's watched and partook in the documentary because it's a really important story that more people should know about. But for some reason, it kind of fell under the radar.
It's interesting. It still feels like the story is just ramping up. Like it's not the end. This is just the beginning. Your story is whetting people's appetite to understand the basics. And I feel like we're going to hear more when Jolo is caught, when Najib gets out of prison. Like there's going to be a lot more things unfolding. A lot of people in America might be implicated that aren't yet, or maybe they are behind the scenes that we don't know yet and are cutting deals. I don't know. But like, I feel like the story isn't at the end yet at all. Do you feel that way?
I think you're absolutely right. Even when we were in post production, so many things are happening.
Mhm,
As mentioned, Najib went to prison as I'm cutting the movie.
mhm.
The opposition leader who I interviewed becomes the prime minister. Tim Leisner, the Goldman Sachs envoy, is testifying against Roger Ng, who's the other Goldman Sachs banker, who was his best friend and underling. All these things are happening concurrent to the creation of the film, and we waited to make this story to make this movie because you need distance from the events to be able to tell the story.
Mm.
So, I mean, it's been like 5 years since everything happened, but even now, the tentacles extend so far that I think you're right. Like, we have so much more to see, so
And
much more.
also, yeah, and you had mentioned the wife. Was it Najib's wife that when they raided the home had um was it millions or $1 billion worth of shoes and bags
I'm not so
holding
good
the
with the
bag?
valuation of shoes, but I know she has something like 300 Birkin bags.
Yeah.
I think that's worth a lot of money,
Yeah, I
and
think so. I would have loved to have seen her closet, but she must have been pretty pissed having them take that
Oh,
all
I
away.
asked Najib about the Birkin bags. I was like, "How do you explain having so many luxury goods in your apartment?" And he had the audacity to be like, "Oh, those weren't bought with stolen money. Those were gifts from other foreign leaders and their wives. They knew my wife liked Birkin bags, so like the King of Jordan would give us a Birkin bag." And that's total bullshit, obviously, but
Right.
you know.
Interesting. But now I saw from your documentary, she's been, sentenced to 10 years as well, but she's out on bail or what's happening with that?
Yeah, she's out on bail, and I think the entire status of all these charges against both her and Najib kind of stand in the balance because there's so much happening right now. There's a lot of scuttlebutt that the current prime minister subtly endorsed this
Ah,
commutation of Najib's sentence in order to consolidate his political coalition,
mm,
which would be a huge betrayal to his voters,
right.
many of whom supported him because they wanted justice for Najib. So I think everything is very tenuous right now out
Right.
there. Um,
Do you ever worry for your safety?
no,
No. Okay.
no.
Easy. Um, and I'm curious in making this film, did you learn anything that you want to share? Was it something that you were like, oh, I got to do more of these kind of documentaries and get a story like this told? Or were you like, I'm never doing this again?
Well, my background is in international production, so that came in really handy.
Mm,
Having to navigate, the multi-country shoot, especially during the lockdown.
mm,
Um, I think, honestly, going into it, I'd never been to Malaysia. I didn't know much about Malaysia at all, but I had to do a quick primer on just the country itself and learn so much about it. And I think, the saddest thing for me is that there's so many nameless, faceless people in Malaysia who have suffered because of this,
mm.
that people kind of gloss over, and that quickly became kind of one of the main things we wanted to showcase in the film, is that it's not just about Hollywood, it's not just about Wall Street. It's built on the backs of these people that, the crimes were committed against.
Right.
And that's who we're trying to, pay respect to, along with the people who uncover the story, because between those two parties, there's a lot of people who put a lot at risk to make sure that this story got out.
Mm.
And if we just focus on kind of the flashy stuff, it's a little glib, and we forget about, there's people that were murdered. There's a prosecutor in the district attorney's office in Malaysia who was murdered after a document was leaked to the press about a pending arrest warrant for the former prime minister. A lot of
Right.
people paid the ultimate price. So I just wanted to make sure that we're able to put all that into context for the viewer and a fuller understanding of what's at stake and what all this stuff cost.
Do you have any other projects coming up on the horizon for you?
Yeah, we're expanding into narrative filmmaking, so I'm actually working on a few short projects right now, and hopefully get those out by the end of the year, and in negotiations with some other documentary projects.